The smoke never truly left the city. It had seeped into the stones of King's Landing the night the Blackwater burned, and even now, with autumn wind smoothing the green scum on the river, the smell clung low to the alleys and curled beneath doors as if wildfire had learned to breathe. It was a city that remembered being saved, which is to say it remembered almost dying. Tywin Lannister could smell it when he crossed the outer yard of the Red Keep, a faint sharpness under the oiled leather and horse. He rode as if he were a younger man, tall in the saddle, the gold of his cloak clean and quiet rather than gaudy, the lion's head on his shoulder as heavy as a memory. The trumpets were done and the cheering finished by the time he dismounted. Courtiers splayed themselves in careful arcs along the steps, banners draped like painted tongues from the walls. Joffrey waited at the head of the stair, crowned with thin razors of iron, smiling with all the grace of a cat who has killed a songbird and expects a song in return. Cersei glowed beside him, brittle with relief. Tyrion stood lower down, pale beneath the stitches, measuring distances as he always did. Men to doors, words to their consequences. "You arrive at last, father," Cersei said, kissing the air near Tywin's cheek. "The realm cannot praise you enough for answering our hour of need." Tywin inclined his head, his eyes briefly touching Joffrey, then the boy's small hand around the scepter. "The realm's gratitude is a poor coin, my queen. The realm's obedience is better. Your grace." He bowed just enough to make the point. Joffrey swelled to it, his mouth opening for a proclamation he had not written. Tywin moved past. There were rooms and rot to inspect, servants to put in their proper corners. He would hear the praise at supper, and he would hear the lies, and he would count both. At the evening's feast, candles stacked in tiers as if light could be multiplied by arithmetic. The king demanded stories of victory. Loras Tyrell obliged him with a clean, rehearsed account of wheeling cavalry and purple banners, each word as polished as the steel he wore. Marjorie's eyes were cleverly cast downward as Joffrey compared the color of her gown to fresh blood. "I prefer fresh blood too," the boy remarked, laughing at his own wit. Tyrion's goblet paused a heartbeat in midair. Olenna Tyrell tapped her cane once against the floor, the lightest correction. Tywin watched and said little. Varys was from nowhere and everywhere, his shave head a gleam under the chandeliers. Littlefinger smiled as if dining were a riddle he had never quite solved. Pycelle wheezed. Kevin sat at Tywin's left hand and ate as a man does who knows that food is fuel before war and ornament afterward. Tommen, mostly forgotten at the far table, swung his legs like a child in a hall too large for him. Tywin noted which servants leaned closer when Joffrey's voice rose. He noted which noble's eyes slid toward the doors when the boy snapped at a singer for missing a stanza. The singer did not miss a second time. When the feast thinned and the wine spread like a stain through the court, Joffrey declared that tales were dull and demanded proof. "Bring me one of Stannis's men," he said, almost in a sing-song. "One of the traitors. I will show the Lady Marjorie how justice looks when the king sits the Iron Throne." "There are prisoners," Cersei said, an eager echo. Tywin set down his knife. "Your Grace, the hour is late. Justice that is hurried is seldom right." "Justice for me is always right," Joffrey replied, white teeth flashing. "Besides, it will be quick. There's no need to draw and quarter when there is a crossbow." "That will not be necessary," Tywin said, not looking at his daughter. He was looking at Olenna, who had not blinked. Joffrey's mouth tightened. "Bring me Ser Axel Florent." "We are not Florents," Marjorie said softly, eyes still lowered. "We are Tyrells." Joffrey laughed. "Then I shall make it a Tyrell." "Ha, only jesting." He clapped and a boy flinched, dropping a flagon, and Joffrey turned the clapping into a cultivated slow beat, a punishment meted in rhythms. Tyrion watched the boy gather the shards and the red wine pooling like a mistake no one would forgive. Tywin did not raise his voice. "No executions this night." He did not add, "because I have not decided who dies." The king's jaw worked. He bit back what he wanted to say because some new sense, fear of this man who had ridden through fire with the river at his back, had taken root. He muttered something vulgar to Ser Boros Blunt instead and threw bread at the dog. The courtiers laughed as if an order had been given. The next day, smoke laid low again. Tywin held council while the city breathed through its teeth. Varys spoke of rats and grain. Littlefinger spoke of loans and iron prices. The Iron Bank of Bravos was discussed without saying a name. Mace Tyrell sent a list of supplies and a shorter list of expectations. The High Septon's seal appeared on a parchment that smelled faintly of incense and indignation. The small folk had begun to gather again in the Street of Flower. The last time they had gathered, they had pulled a man from his saddle and torn out his tongue. They had nearly taken the king by the ankle until Sandor Clegane chopped their fingers to coins. Now they gathered with candles for a thanksgiving, the Septon wrote, and a warning. The gods had long memories too. Candles can set fires, Joffrey said, picking the scab of a scowl. Shall I send them torches? The September is not your tilt yard, Tyrion said. Your grace. Joffrey's eyes sharpened like a blade held to the light. I will have your tongue for insolence. After my wine, Tyrion said, and took a slow swallow. Cersei's knuckles were white on the chair's arm. If you spoke more sweetly, imp, you might have friends. I prefer truth to sweetness, Tyrion said, not looking at her. I have no stomach for honey to wash down blood. The people are fed on spectacle, Littlefinger observed. We are all fed on something. They will be fed on bread, Tywin said. If the Tyrells cozen us with flower carts while counting our debts, they will learn a Lannister counts too. Olenna came that afternoon without announcement, because no announcement could make her more real than the thump of her cane and the peppermint on her tongue. Tywin received her alone, in a chamber that had been Robert's once and smelled faintly of beer soaked into oak. They stood. Old lions do not sit to speak with each other. There are rumors, she said, as if she were reading a menu. There are always rumors. This one smells worse than most. They say your sweet boy king has a taste for chasing cats with crossbows. Cats are resilient. Girls are not. They say many things, Tywin replied. His hands were empty, and that was a choice. I prefer to deal in what men can be made to say under oath. Men, she said, dry amusement in the single word. My granddaughter is a woman. The realm paints her as a saint in a summer gown. She is not. She is a girl who wants to live and to be queen, and to do a little good if she can. I will not deliver her to a boy who cannot keep his hand from his toys. Nor will I, Tywin said. Her eyes were needles. He allowed himself the smallest concession. Things cannot continue as they have. Then prune your tree, Olenna advised, lifting one hand, before it grows a fruit that poisons the orchard. If the king can be made to understand gentleness, do so. If not, we shall have to be practical. I did not come to beg. I came to warn. If the king so much as bruises a Tyrell girl, I shall take my roses and their bread and feed our own in the reach. And you will discover that wildfire burns bright and quick, but hunger burns longer. When winter comes, Tywin said, the realm will need the reach. I do not forget this. When winter comes, Olenna said, the realm will need a child on the throne who does not delight in suffering. Your second grandson has pink cheeks and soft hands. He does not frighten me in the least. She tapped her cane against his boot with deliberate impudence. Make it so. When she had gone, Tywin stood a long while where she had stood. His grandfather's portrait glowered over the mantel, a man with a jaw like a chopping block. Tywin had despised his father's softness and its consequences. He had built himself into a scythe. The scythe must be used or it rusted. He called for Kevin. We are past the time of scolding, Tywin said. The boy will not learn. We must consider the remedy that cannot be spoken. Kevin closed his eyes. He was a man who always counted to 3 when he was given a thing he could not carry. Cersei will break, Tywin said. He did not soften. But she will not be allowed to break the realm with her. Speak to Balon Swan. I want Tommen guarded without offense. Guarded as if he were a chest of golden dragons left in the street. And Joffrey, Kevin asked, the name a rock in his mouth. Observed, contained. We cannot do this with the world watching. Tywin looked out the narrow archer's slit that passed for a window. Varys will do what he always does. He will hear dust settle, and he will tell me which dust matters. The dust began to matter the next day. In Flea Bottom, a baker's boy with hair like wheat had stood on a crate and sung in a voice like a reed pipe. A little song of the queen-to-be and the brave knights who had saved them. A song with a sharp last verse about kings who hid while others fought. The gold cloaks had taken him by the ear to the Red Keep because someone had taught them that offering up cheeky boys made lords smile. Joffrey took a fancy to him. The boy sang again in a small courtyard while the king chewed candied almonds. He missed a note when he saw the crossbow. Tyrion found the boy's body later in one of the midden heaps where even rats disdained the company. He had 3 bolts in him and eyes open to nothing. 2 of the bolts had been removed, then rammed back in sideways for sport. By the time Tyrion came to court, the sun had found a slit in the cloud and laid a bar of bright heat across the floor tiles as if it meant to mark a place for violence. He stood before the throne and spoke clearly. "The king amused himself today," he said. "The king made the gods look away." Joffrey blinked slowly, savoring the attention. "Do you complain, uncle? Should I give you a turn? You can be the singer." He mimed a plucking at his own throat. No voice. The hall held itself utterly still. Cersei stared at Tyrion as if he were something she had once dropped in a well and found again in her soup. "The boy sang," Tyrion said. "The boy died. The baker's wife has no son now. The gods, your grace, are patient. The people are not." "Then I will teach them patience," Joffrey said, sprung to his feet. "Ser Meryn, bring 2 of the loud ones from yesterday's prayer. We will have quiet." "Enough," Tywin said. He did not raise his voice. The small court of men and women held its breath as if a hand closed upon it. "There will be no more sport. Not with crossbows. Not with boys." "I am the king," Joffrey said, daring him. Tywin met the boy's eyes and let the weight of his gaze be a mailed fist. "You are a boy whom men call king. That is a thing that can be changed." It was the closest he had come to saying the words that had started to take shape in him like ice finding a cup. Cersei stood so suddenly her chair toppled. "You will not speak to him so. I will speak to him as one must when a prince mistakes cruelty for power." "Sit," Tywin said, and somehow the word was not for her alone. She sat. Joffrey's fingers had left little crescents in the wood of the scepter. That night, candles were set before the doors of the September of Baelor like a ragged crown. The small folk knelt and prayed their thanks for the city spared, and their grief for the baker's boy, and their terror for whatever would be taken next. The High Septon came down the steps like a man carrying his bones in both hands. He raised a hand and spoke of mercy. A dull murmuring, like the river inside a cave, answered him. Tywin heard the murmuring from his tower room, the way men hear the sea in their sleep. He drank 1 cup of wine and considered the maps on the table, name after name shaped like a promise kept or broken. He thought of Joanna, whose laughter had been clear water, who had died trying to deliver him a son who might have balanced him. He thought of Tytos, who had smiled and forgiven and pardoned until the lions that were not his ate him. A tap sounded at the door. Varys slid into the room, apologetic as a cat caught with cream. "The dust is moving," Varys said. Tywin let the pause turn the spider's words into something heavy. "Say, the boy's mother wails and tears her hair, and sends for the Kettleblacks to oath themselves to her alone. The boy himself has taken offense at being called a boy. He has been told, foolishly, that some plan exists to change the order of things. Word reached him through a mouth that will shortly have no tongue. He has been to Tommen's chamber twice today. He sent away 2 servants. The 3rd refused to go. He slapped her. The boy does not like being contradicted." "What of Balon Swan?" Tywin asked. "In attendance. Attentive." "He is as honorable as a song," Varys said regretfully. "Honorable men are hard to arrange. They stand by their mirrors at the wrong times. Send him to me." "He is at his post," Varys observed. "Send him to me," Tywin repeated. And put 2 men you would trust with your secrets at Tommen's door until he returns. I want them who can hold their tongues as well as hold a line." Varys bowed so low his nose might have kissed the rug. "As you wish." Balon Swan came heavy with mail, a man built like a solution to a question no one wanted to ask. He listened to what Tywin asked of him and did not interrupt. When Tywin had finished, Swan stared at a point somewhere slightly above Tywin's shoulder. "I serve the king," he said. "You serve the realm," Tywin corrected, not unkindly. "The boy who now wears the crown has begun to mistake a brother for a rival because some fool told him that rivalries exist. You will stand between him and his brother if you must. If that is disobedience, I will bear it upon my own head. I ask you to be a man, Ser Balon, not a piece on a board." Swan's throat worked. "If he gives an order, consider who gave the order that put wildfire under the river," Tywin said, and watched Swan reconsider what obedience looked like. "You are a knight of the Kingsguard. Guard the king. And remember that there is more than one of that title in this city tonight." Swan went, the duty planted in him like a standard. Tywin sat. He let the quiet creep over him. It broke much sooner than he had hoped. The shouts were not loud so much as sharp, as if struck from wood. The corridor outside Tommen's chamber was a short one, ending in a casement window that looked out over a pale slice of moon. Tywin was on his feet and moving before his mind had quite caught up with his body. Kevan met him in the passage and Tyrion, called by the same nerves, came panting. Balon Swan's voice sounded once like a bell. Then the bell became a clash. The Kingsguard were 2 good men and 1 rotten one in a place too narrow for swords. Meryn Trant stood to one side, his sword in his hand and nothing in his eyes. Balon had stepped between Tommen's door and the figure that came toward it. Joffrey, no crown now, no scepter, only a bright toy in his hands. The toy was a crossbow. The bolts were small and barbed and would do exactly the work they were built to do. "Move," Joffrey said, his hair like straw under torchlight. "He thinks he will be king? I will show him a crown through his throat." Swan's body was a shield. "Your Grace, you must not." "I must not be disobeyed," Joffrey said, lifting the bow. He was too close for the thing to be steady, but it did not need to be steady. The bolt would travel a yard and punch through a child's chest. That was how the toy had been made. Tyrion came from the other side and the space, somehow, shrank further. "Joffrey," he said. "Not your Grace, not boy, only the name, as if naming a person might bring him back into being a person. Your brother is no threat. He is a child. I was a child. No one kept me safe from the world." Joffrey's lip curled, and for a heartbeat Tywin saw a sliver of something like hurt under the anger. Then the hurt turned to a kind of glee. "I cut open a cat once and found the kittens inside still moving. They make noises even without their mother. Did you know? I can find out what noises Tommen makes." Tywin moved because there was no time left for words to unmake this. The world became the width of a bolt and the beat of his heart. He stepped into Joffrey's line between the bow and the door and brought one hand up not to push but to seize. He had not ever forgotten what it is to strangle a man in armor to stop him from screaming, because some things done young were grooves in the flesh. He seized the bow with his left and the boy's wrist with his right. Joffrey yanked reflexively. The bolt sang past Tywin's shoulder and thunked into the door. Through the thin wood came a small yelp. "Tommen," Tyrion shouted. Meryn Trant took a half step and stopped because he did not know how to obey 2 orders at once. Swan surged forward and wrenched at the bow. Joffrey bit. Actually bit Tywin's hand like a dog, and the pain surprised him with its intimacy. Tywin's grip tightened. He drove Joffrey backward into the wall and tore the crossbow from him. The boy's free hand flashed in a line of silver. A dagger pushed out from a sleeve where he had hidden it. It scraped Balon's mail and came down again toward Tywin's belly. Tywin did not think. He shifted his weight the way a swordsman does and felt the dagger skitter against the lion's head mount he wore. His own knife was a plain thing, functional, the leather grip shaped by years of hands. He drew it and put it precisely where it needed to go to end a fight. The blade entered Joffrey just under the breastbone, angled up. A gasp left the boy as if something had been let out of him like air from a punctured wineskin. He stared at Tywin with shock, then hate, then a blankness like the face of a frozen river. They slid together to the floor. The knife came out red. The boy's breath came twice, shallow, then again. He tried to speak and made a wet sound. He made it again, forming the start of a word, mother, and the word died on his teeth. For one instant, Tywin felt the weight of the child he had once seen lift a wooden sword and slash at shadows. A crown far in the future, a mother laughing, a grandfather who had believed a hard world could be hammered flat by a harder will. Joffrey's eyes filmed. His body, so quick for so long to cruelty, could not hold heat. Tywin lifted his hand from the boy's wrist and it left a red ring. "Open the door," Tywin said, and his voice was the same as always, even though his lungs were burning and his hand throbbed where teeth had broken skin. "Let me see, Tommen." Tyrion's eyes were two coins thrown into a well. He stared, then moved to the door, yanked the bolt, and pushed inside. Tommen sat on his bed, clutching a pillow to his chest, his face as pale as fresh milk, eyes rimmed red. A bolt had cracked the wood above his head and stuck like an ugly decoration. Tyrion crossed the room and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's all right," he said, and felt the lie like a splinter. "It's all right." Balon Swan knelt, his mouth open to say a knight's words, Abu. What had been done to save a king and how it was necessary. He closed his mouth. He looked at the body of one king and then at the living boy who would be another. "My lord," he said quiet. "What now?" "Now," Tywin said. "We wash the blood from the stones and decide what story the stones will tell." Cersei came as if someone had torn a seam in the air and she had fallen through it. She saw the smear on the floor and then the shape it made and began to keen, that raw animal sound of a mother who cannot bear the world's math. She flung herself at Joffrey's body, lifted his head, screamed at Tyrion, screamed at Tywin, screamed at the gods. She beat at Tywin's chest and left 4 crescents of blood where her nails had been. He endured it as one endures flood or drought, a force beyond negotiation. When her screams broke into hoarseness, he said, "He tried to kill his brother. He forced my hand." She stared at him, and in her eyes he saw something irrevocable shift. "You lie," she said, very clear. "You have always hated what I brought into the world. You would have killed them in the cradle if you dared. You are a monster. You have no blood." Tyrion intended to say something that would carry her anger away from the boy clutching a pillow. Instead, he found himself choking on words. He could not love Joffrey, but he had known him, and the sight of his sister's grief scoured places he had kept behind jokes and cups. He stepped in front of Tommen without thinking. "I'll find the Septon," he said to no one. "There should be prayers." "Prayers," Cersei spat. "Prayers for what he has done." Her eyes were on Tywin. "You think to put that soft child in his place, and you think I will smile and weep in the right corners, and you think I will forget. I will not forget." "You will do what I tell you," Tywin said. The words landed in the room like stones dropped down a well. "Tomorrow the bells will ring. The city will mourn. The tale they will hear is that the king died tragically in a quarrel in his brother's chambers when a weapon discharged. That is true enough. Tommen will be crowned. He will marry Marjorie Tyrell. You will present yourself at court and assure the city that the queen stands with the new king. And you will not, on pain of losing the only child left to you, make war upon me in my own house." Cersei's mouth twisted. "I have no house. You took it from me when you took my mother to her grave and me to a stranger's bed." Tywin did not let himself hear that. He nodded to Kevin. "Clear this hallway. Varys, wherever you are, do what you do." "I am always where I need to be," Varys said from nowhere in particular. "And I always do my best." Before dawn, the bells spoke. King's Landing woke to a sound it knew too well. Grief given a shape. Men and women opened doors and leaned their heads out as if the air had changed density. The first rumor, poison, was pushed under by the second. Assassins. And by mid-morning both had been crushed under the third. that the young king had died while bravely defending his brother from a traitor in white. There is no story so incredible that it cannot be believed if it spares the believer from recognizing a truth. And this, Tywin knew, would be close enough. Balon Swan gave a statement that had a knight's plainness and was careful with pronouns. Ser Meryn Trant said nothing, which suited Tywin perfectly. The throne room, when Tommen was led there, looked like a mouth someone had scrubbed. Fresh rushes, fresh tapestry. The great sword of the throne was cold and unadorned. Tommen's steps were small. His hand, when the crown touched it briefly before being set on his head, was trembling. Marjorie watched him with a calculation that was not unkind. When the High Septon intoned the words that made kings in the eyes of men, Tywin felt the city's breath catch and then begin again. The realm had been given a child to fold its anxiety around. For a time, that would be enough. That evening, Olenna came without her cane, as if ceremony required her to appear slightly younger. She stood where she had stood before and regarded Tywin with a face carved from the same wood that had carved her. That was a clean performance for a tragedy. We shall be kind in our mourning. We shall use the right cloth for the right tears. She paused. And my girl, she will marry the king, Tywin said. She will be safe. Safe is a word invented by men to console women, Olenna said. I will settle for safer. Your daughter is a storm gathering behind a glass. Keep her far from my girl's hairpins. She will be managed. I have lived through 7 kings being managed, Olenna said. Only 2 were, and one of them was a fool who listened because he had no thoughts. Do not fail to do what you started tonight, my lord. It is an ugly mercy, but it is mercy for the city if not for your blood. When she had gone, Tywin looked at the knife on the table and felt his hand throb in memory of teeth. He told himself, as he had told men all his life, that feeling comes after duty if there is any feeling left. He sent for a maester, who bound his hand and said nothing even when Tywin did not flinch as the alcohol bit him. Word ran west at horse speed and raven speed. It reached the twins as a letter with stiff edges and precise handwriting, promising a place for Walder Frey's pride. It reached the dread fort as a whisper that smelled of opportunity. It reached Riverrun like a shadow. Robb Stark still wore his crown of the north. He still had a mother with grief folded in her like winter linen. He still had banners that moved like a field in wind. Tywin looked at the map and touched a finger to each place where the realm could be coaxed into making the choice he needed. He did not sing. He had never been a man for songs. The rains would come where he sent them. Sansa Stark learned of Joffrey's death because the castle itself told her. Castle walls do not speak, but they do carry sound. Bells hum, steps change. She stood at a window and watched the river move, slow and ugly, and imagined the boy king falling forever through water. She had thought she would feel elation. Relief came instead, a relief so pure it made her knees weak and then a guilt for feeling it. She thought of the baker's boy she had not seen die. She thought of the September, and of candles, and of her father on his knees on a different day. In her mind, she went again to the September of Baelor and whispered his name as if names could be strings tied to the dead. Tyrion found her as she set a candle at the foot of a painted maiden with palms open. The city will have candles enough to burn us to the foundations, he said, but his tone did not mock. He lit the candle with his own taper and the little flame leapt as if eager to be of use. They crowned Tommen. He cried a little afterward. Don't tell anyone. It would spoil the story. He's only a child, Sansa said. So was the last one, Tyrion answered, and regretted it at once. This one is different, where he is for now. Men and women will make him what they are paid to make him. I will try to pay the right ones. He looked at her. Do you think me a monster, my lady? She thought of Joffrey's lips, blue around the edges in her memory of fear, and of Tyrion's hand steady when he lit a candle instead of striking her. She wanted to say no. She wanted to say yes. I think you are a man in a place where men fail, she said at last, which was true and not nearly enough. Tywin did not go to the September. He went to his solar and wrote letters that looked like blades. He wrote to the Freys. He wrote to the Boltons. He wrote to the Iron Bank of Bravos, courteously and with an understanding of numbers that had seduced kings less proud than he. He wrote to Doran Martell in a language that did not mention Elia and did not forget her. He wrote to Lisa Arryn with sweetness that must pass through Peter Baelish's hands. He wrote because writing was the shape of power when swords slept. Cersei went to the September for a day, and then to her bed for 2, and then to the Kettleblacks. She tried to order Osmond to kill her father. Osmond declined in the elegant way of men who prefer coin to danger. She sent for Qyburn, who had found his way from Harrenhal like a weed finds its way between stones. He brought with him a smell of clean linen and corruption. He touched her wrist and said words about humors. He listened as she told him about a schism, the thing that happens inside a person when hate has devoured everything else and finds that it is still hungry. Qyburn nodded. He had seen wounds that would not close. He knew how to keep them from killing a body while letting them keep their shape. "Your father is a necessary evil," he told her. "Evil can be outlasted. It grows tired. It has to sleep. You have patience." "I have wine," Cersei said. "Wine is a kind of patience," Qyburn allowed. Jaime came back with a hand less than he had left with. The city looked different to him, not because the stones had changed, but because his balance had. The Kingslayer had lost the thing that had made him sure of who he was. He would be long discovering whether that had been a gift. He asked for his sister and found her weeping over Joffrey's cloak. He asked for his father and found a man who looked precisely like himself, only older and harder. "You killed him," Jaime said. "Not an accusation so much as the first stone of a road he would have to walk. I performed an act that saved your brother and kept your house from destroying itself," Tywin answered. "Do you want me to be sorry as a father? Cannot do what I do and weep for it. Cannot be two men. If you need grief, go to the September. If you need a future, sit down." "Is that all there is in you?" Jaime asked. "Rock and coin? No blood?" Tywin did not look up from the letter he was sealing. "There is more blood in me than was in the boy who would have murdered his brother to keep a chair. Sit." He lifted his eyes. "I will not say I loved him, because love in this place is a thing that rots faster than fish on a cart. But he was mine, and I put the knife in him. Do you think I sleep?" Jaime did not know what to do with that. He rarely knew what to do when men he had measured were larger or smaller in the wrong places. He sat and looked at his father and saw for the first time that the gold in the Lannister hair was not brightness but a kind of brittle sheen. He touched the stump where his hand had been and thought of a boy he had pushed from a window, and how here was a man who had killed his own blood, and wondered if they were in a circle drawn by the gods for their amusement. That winter the Red Wedding was held when there was still a green edge to the grass underfoot. The twins became a lesson in hospitality that everyone learned and no one admitted to having learned. Swords and song arrived together. The drums were the sound of blades finding bellies. Tywin received the raven and did not smile. He wrote again, and the words were like water that looks clean and is not. He did not attend the feasts that followed in the Lannister halls, the ones where lesser men toasted the ending of things they had feared. He counted the gains and the losses and added a column for consequence. Sansa heard the news in a room with no candles because she could not bear light at that moment. Tyrion came in with his head bowed and told her in plain words. She made no sound. She sat and thought of her mother's hands, always doing, and of Robb's half-smile, and of Grey Wind. She thought of music being a knife. She thought of knives being a kind of music. Tyrion sat opposite her and did not touch her because he had learned one lesson a long time ago that still served him. Some griefs turn hands into snakes. They sat together, and the city around them went on eating and shitting and trading and laughing and weeping as cities do when parts of the world end out of sight. In the weeks that followed, Tommen grew into his chair not like a boy filling his father's boots, but like a seedling in a protected place, thin and tender but upright. He fed his cat under the table and was told gently not to buy Marjorie, who fed it instead. He asked which prayer he should learn and which he should say for his brother. The High Septon taught him a short one. He slept sometimes holding the pillow as if it were an anchor. He warmed to Tyrion because Tyrion did not demand questions be answered or call him brave. He watched his mother with frightened love. He learned to read a little more swiftly, to sit quiet a little longer, to say, "My lords," without flinching. He did not forget that a bolt had kissed the wood above his head. No one told him about the knife. He felt it anyway when Tywin passed him and laid a hand on his hair in a gesture so formal it might have been an oath. Cersei came to the council now and then and flung words at Littlefinger the way one flings stones at crows. Littlefinger smiled and caught the stones and put them in his pocket because stones sometimes purchase things cheaper than coin. He arranged to leave for the Vale with a knighthood and the kind of letter that opens doors. Varys hummed. Pycelle nodded and fell asleep. Kevin coughed and made the work smoother. The Tyrells sent milk and bread and soldiers. The Iron Bank sent a note in the Curtis hand that says perhaps. Tywin and Olenna met one last time, after the Red Wedding had made their alliance a thing set in iron and horror. She took his hand as if testing the grip. "You have strength enough to be hated by everyone whose hate matters," she said, a compliment harder than most. "Do not fail now and teach the city that monstrous deeds can always be made tidy. Some cannot. Even you cannot sweep everything under your carpets." "I do not sweep," Tywin said. "I build. All buildings become graves if you live in them long enough," Olenna said and smiled. "That is a truth a gardener knows." They were not friends. They were competent. Sometimes that is more intimate than the other thing. The winter was late. Snow blew once or twice, in little tantrums that delighted children and irritated grooms. The smell of smoke thinned a bit at last. The city learned how to carry the name of a dead king and keep the streets in order. The cat Tommen loved had 3 kittens in a cupboard. He named one Lion for bravery, one Loaf because he had bread in his fur from sleeping in the kitchen, and one Quiet because quiet was a thing Tommen had learned could be kind. His mother came to the cupboard one day and sneered at the mess. His grandfather never came to the cupboard, but he heard about it and did not forbid the kittens as he might have once. He told himself he had too many wars to fight this one. He told himself it did not matter. He was a man who had given the order for thousands to die by proxy without a pinch of hesitation. He had put his knife into his own blood. He let a boy keep his kittens. The mind is a nest for paradox if you are powerful enough to afford such hobbies. On some mornings Tywin would wake before the lamp had burned to a crater and feel the city around him like a weight. He would measure the cost of what he had done without allowing himself to assign it numbers. In the ledger inside him that had always balanced, a column now refused to sit. Jaime said little to him in those days and less to others. He went to the yard and failed at things and then succeeded in other things, which was worse. He took to walking the walls late, the way men do who hope for cold to work a change in their minds. One night he met Tyrion there and they stood side by side, both looking at a city neither could own. "Did you ever think," Jaime asked, "that we would make ourselves so neatly into a story?" "We have never been anything else," Tyrion said, and then laughed quietly and without joy at his own cleverness. "The trick is to avoid being someone else's tidy moral. We must be our own messy one." "Father thinks he saved the realm," Jaime said. "He did," Tyrion answered after a long time. "I suppose he did. Sometimes salvation is shaped like a knife. Cersei will kill him for it if she can." "If she can," Tyrion echoed. He thought of crossbows in the half-dark more often than he admitted. He thought, sometimes, of visiting the armory and taking one into his hands and seeing how the weight felt, whether it suited him. He did not. He lit another candle instead. Sansa watched, in those same nights, the moon rise over the river and learned that the world can be both kinder and worse once a single person is removed. She found herself reading more, because words held her in a way nothing else did. She found herself listening to Marjorie when Marjorie spoke of gardens and girls and the peculiar rules of the court, which were different from the rules of women in the north but not entirely new. You must be quiet sometimes to be loud later. You must let men think they have invented what you told them yesterday. Sansa understood these as tactics in a war that never named itself. She learned when to lower her eyes and when to lift them. On an evening that had the taste of metal in the air, Tywin stood in the throne room alone. The Iron Throne sat as it always had, ungainly, ugly, honest about the truth it held, Power is uncomfortable, it cuts, it leaves wounds that do not heal well. He approached it not as a man yearning to sit, but as a craftsman critiques a flawed piece handed down by an ambitious apprentice. He touched none of its edges. He stood with his hands behind his back and thought of the first time he had seen it. A younger man with a wife beside him and a father still alive, and of this night older and more themselves. He heard soft steps and did not turn. Tommen had ways of moving that announced him without noise. The boy came to a stop 3 paces away and said, "Grandfather?" As if the room could scold him for entering it. Tywin turned then. Tommen wore a robe too large and his feet were bare. Absurdly, he clutched the cat called Quiet. The cat was patient and allowed itself to be clutched. "You should wear shoes," Tywin said, "because the body knows the small things before the brain can bear the large ones." "I couldn't sleep," Tommen said. "Sometimes I hear." He did not finish. "Can I ask you something?" Tywin nodded. The cat's tail flicked once. "Ask. Did my brother die because of me?" Tywin looked at the boy for a long time and then did a thing he would have sworn he could not do before that night in the corridor. He knelt. Not because a king stood before him, but because a child did, and because there are only so many weights a spine can carry before it must fold to shift them. He rested his hand, the one with the faded bite scars, on Tommen's shoulder. "Your brother died because I would not let a worse thing happen," he said. He did not dress it in parchment or forgettable phrases. "I made a choice a man should not have to make. I do not expect you to forgive me when you are old enough to understand it. I do not require you to love me for it. I require you to be a better king than he would have been. That will be how you answer what was done." Tommen looked at him with a seriousness that made him look oddly like Jaime at 6. "I will try," he said. "I don't know what to do, but I will try." "That is all," Tywin said, standing. "Now go to bed, and put on shoes next time." The boy smiled a little, the kind of tentative smile that happens when a bridge has held your weight for the first time. He went. The cat looked back briefly as if to assure him that cats learn the shapes of rooms, and then disappeared with its boy. Tywin remained. He listened to the wind move through the arrow slits and to the old IR. On creak as if it had bones. In the ledger of his mind, the stubborn column did not soften. He closed his eyes and saw green light on water and a boy's surprise and his own hand lifting a knife as if the hand were intelligent and the man merely a transport. He saw Joanna smiling with flour on her cheek, telling him he took bread too seriously, that he would break his teeth if he bit life so hard. He remembered what it had felt like to be called merciless and correct both. He opened his eyes and the room was the same, honest and cruel. In the months that followed, the realm learned how to speak the new story. The small folk invented a little prayer for the young king who loved kittens but would grow into a lion. The Tyrells taught the city how to arrange flowers as if they mattered. Varys taught the council how to overlook certain matters in exchange for the continued existence of their own necks. Littlefinger kissed the veil and made it his. The Iron Bank smiled the way a shark smiles when it reminds a fisherman of their agreement. The North went quiet in a way that was not peace. The Riverlands bled. The Dornish wrote back in sentences that could be read 3 ways. The rains fell in places they were not wanted and did not in places that needed them. And in the Red Keep, a man wrote letters and met eyes and decided meals and wars with the same carefulness he had always used, and sometimes woke with blood on his hand that was not there when he went to sleep. Cersei dressed for mourning for as long as propriety allowed and then longer. She wore the color like a weapon. She sat beside Tommen with a control that strained the edges of her mouth, a thin smile like parchment stretched on a drum. She spoke when spoken to and spoke when not, and said the bare minimum that the story required, and made her hatred for her father into a reservoir she would draw from later. Qyburn kept the vessel of her rage from cracking through by giving it the occasional professional attention wounds deserve. She waited. She did not forget. Jaime came to her bed once and found that grief had made of her something too sharp to hold. He went to the White Sword Tower and read the Book of the Kingsguard with slow care, tracing with his left hand the blank leaves reserved for him. He wrote a sentence that had no flourish. He protected King Tommen from his brother with the help of Lord Tywin. He stared at it for a long time and then shut the book. He did not tell anyone he had written it, but the knowledge of the sentence existed between him and his father like a bridge neither of them trusted. Tyrion drank less and more carefully. He learned the shape of Tommen's mind and arranged tutors like furniture in rooms with light. He sparred with Olenna with words and discovered that it was like fencing with a trellis, elegant and unforgiving. He took Sansa to the Godswood because the north in it pleased her, and because he was learning that the best gifts are the ones that do not look like gifts. He spoke less to Varys about destiny and more about laundry. He looked sometimes at the crossbows on the wall in the armory and looked away. On a morning of odd warmth, Tywin stepped onto a balcony and watched gulls wheel above the river. Their cries were the same as they had been when he was a boy, which was to say they sounded like hunger wearing laughter as a mask. He put his hands on the parapet and let the stones cool climb into him. He was thinking about a shipment of grain from Old Town that had not arrived when he heard footsteps and did not turn. He was thinking about whether to allow Mace Tyrell the honor he craved when he heard the softest click in the world, the sound of a door's latch settling. He smiled without meaning to. "I thought you would come at night," he said, and his breath made a small cloud and vanished. Cersei walked to the rail and stood 5 paces away, as if they were 2 rulers admiring a view they had purchased with different currencies. "I thought of it," she said, "but then I remembered you are not afraid of night. You are afraid of nothing." "That is not true," Tywin said. "I am afraid of a great many things. I have learned to ignore it when it is not useful." "You are a cold thing," she said. "So were the stones that built Casterly Rock," he answered. "They held all the same." She looked at him with something that was not quite hatred, something worse. "You think you saved the realm by murdering my son. I saved your other son. The realm came along because it had to. I will not explain it again." He looked at her, seeing the girl she had been and the woman she had forced herself into being. "Do not let your grief become foolishness, Cersei. You will lose everything, including the boy you have left, if you make war on me." She smiled. "I am already making war on you, father. I am merely choosing the hour of my battles." She touched the rail with her fingertips as if testing how easily it would take a stain. "You killed your own blood. I will see yours spilled for it." "You have no patience for slow deaths," he observed. "I am learning," she said, and left him with the gulls and the smell of the river and the iron scum of wildfire that never entirely went away. Tywin remained. Somewhere in the city a boy cried because he had fallen and skinned his knees, and somewhere else a woman laughed because her lover had said something foolish and endearing, and somewhere else a man died with no one to hold his hand because he had no friends who were not paid and they had already been paid. The city kept on being itself. The realm kept on balancing on the knife's edge he had set for it. He had chosen a cut and made it, and he knew that every cut has a cost. He returned to his table. He took up his pen. He wrote a letter to a lord whose loyalty he did not trust and told him a story about honor he knew the man believed himself to love. He wrote because it was what he knew. He pressed the seal and flame licked the wax, and for a heartbeat he saw a green glow and heard a boy's breath stop. He closed his eyes and he told himself a truth that would have disgusted a younger version of himself but satisfied the man he had become. That sometimes the difference between a butcher and a surgeon is not in the sharpness of their knives but in the story told afterward. The city believed the story because it needed to. The realm held for a while because it wanted to. And in a quiet room at the end of a corridor once marked by blood, a boy king slept with a cat at his feet, his breath steady and soft, and that was an answer of its own.